Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate the enthusiastic introduction, but no announcements here today. But it's great to be back here at the conference and with so many friends and the opportunity to talk to fellow conservatives and encourage you that, as Pat was saying earlier, that brighter days are ahead of us, but it is up to us. I think Pat's message is pretty clear. He's right, there's no inevitability, but it takes all of us to work together. And unfortunately, in the last few elections, we haven't done a very good job of that. We've lost two elections, frankly, that have been devastating to our country. And one of the stories I love to tell is the story of a man named G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton was a great social reformer back in the turn of the last century in the United Kingdom, and he was often criticized by the liberal tabloids for his conservative principles and values. And so one day they asked him to write a column entitled "What's Wrong with the World?" thinking that they would poke fun at all the list of all the maladies that I'm sure that Pat talked to you about, all the problems that were confronting the global empire of the United Kingdom at that time. And so Chesterton said, "Okay, I'll do it." The next day he submitted the following essay: "What's wrong with the world? I am." Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton. Whether we like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the problems that we're confronting in America today are as a result of the fact that we let it happen. I know it's not an easy thing to hear, but the bottom line is what Ronald Reagan said back in his great speech, "Time to Choose," is true. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It is up to every generation to fight for it. And if you look at the situations that we're confronting in the world today, freedom is definitely on the wane around the world. Democracy is not flourishing. Freedom is not flourishing. And even here at home, we're seeing fundamental freedoms under attack by a government that is going bigger and more dominant and more intolerant. I want to talk to you about three issues. And I think there are three key issues that are on the minds of Americans right now and are important for whoever our nominee is to be able to converse on these three issues persuasively, I would even say winsomely, to be able to attract and embrace the principles that made our country great in a way that shows a real vision for how America's days are better. Not just America's days are better, but very importantly, how every American will be able to realize that American dream. A year ago, I wrote a book called Blue Collar Conservatives. And I wrote that book as a little bit of a memoir of the 2012 campaign, but also looking forward and talking about what we were able to accomplish in 2012, but why we were able to accomplish it. Some of you may remember the last time I ran for office here in Pennsylvania, things didn't go very well. So how does someone who runs a race like that and loses, as I did, turn around and go up against a guy who's outspending me 8-1 when Fox News about this time 4 years ago ran a profile of the top 15 candidates for president? I wasn't on that list. How did that person end up winning 11 states, more than any second-place finisher since Ronald Reagan back in 1976? How did you get outspent 7-8-1 and get 4 million votes, win more counties than all the other candidates combined in the race? How does that happen? Well, some have suggested, well, you were just the last man standing. That may have been true, but I think what the truth is that we were the last person standing because we were standing for somebody. We were standing for the people in America who nobody thinks really cares about that anymore. During the campaign, I talked about the 75% of Americans in this country who don't have a college degree and who neither party talks about, ever. I talk about the 90% of Americans who are workers in this country who don't run or own their own business. I always found it remarkable. I gave a speech at the National Convention in 2012, and before I came on the stage on that Tuesday night, we had a series of wonderful small business people get up, and the signs all over the hall saying, "We built that." And so for an hour or so, we brought small business person after small business person out there condemning President Obama for slighting them. And not a single worker took the stage. And 90% of America are workers, not owners. And we don't talk about them. And here's the sad part. Neither do they. Oh, they talk at them. They say, oh, we'll give you this benefit or that benefit. But they don't really communicate a message of hope and opportunity. It's a message of sufficiency, poverty, and dependency. In the last election, the second most answered question as to what the most important issue was, 23% of the electorate, mostly lower and middle income Americans, answered the most important question in the 2012 election for them was, as to why they voted for president, does he care about people like me? Among those people, our candidate got 19% of the vote. The votes are out there, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's about cranking up the conservative base. I agree with that. I'll talk about that. But it's also about reaching out to the people who feel like neither party cares about them. That's the reason we were able to be successful. We were able to be successful because we went out and talked about vocational education being put back in high schools to give skills to people so they can have jobs in the future. We talked about the importance of creating a level playing field so we could revitalize the manufacturing sector of our economy. There was a company sold about a year ago called WhatsApp for $19 billion. $19 billion. They had 55 employees. Now imagine a $19 billion manufacturing company. You want to talk about wealth redistribution? That's how the economy works. When the economy, if we can create an economy that allows for opportunities for every American to rise. And unfortunately, Republicans don't do that. We don't have a message. We have a message that talks about tax cuts for the rich, talks about balancing the budget and cutting spending. All well and good. I'm for all those things. It's insufficient in America today. Why? Because it's the same message we've been using for 35 years. Well, some people would say, well, that was the message Ronald Reagan delivered. That's right. Can you imagine Ronald Reagan standing up and saying we need the message that Wendell Willkie delivered? Because that's how long ago from Reagan we are. 35 years. The distance between Willkie and Reagan is the distance between us and Reagan. We're tired and we're old and it's not working. And the bottom line is America is different. It's a different country. The problems aren't the same as the problems that confronted Ronald Reagan. I walk around carrying 2 books. Yes, I talk about manufacturing, I talk about energy, I talk about roads and bridges and building things and creating a vibrancy and a dynamic in America for everybody. But I also talk about the fundamental problem that's confronting this country that wasn't the problem in 1980. I carry 2 books around with me. One written by a guy over here on the right is a libertarian by the name of Charles Murray. Works for the American Enterprise Institute and wrote a book a few years ago called Coming Apart, where he talks about 2 American cities, Belmont outside of Chicago and Fishtown in Philadelphia. He talks about how white America, he didn't talk about black America, talk about white America, how it was coming apart. And the principal problem of opportunity in America, he centered on one element. I talked about it a lot during the campaign, talked about that book a lot. But now another book's come out just a few weeks ago from a Harvard sociologist who's a liberal, a guy named Robert Putnam, who wrote a book many years ago called Beau and Alone. Very famous book. Well, he's now written his second major work, and it's called Our Kids. And you know what? Robert Putnam comes to the same conclusion, Charles Murray, a left-right together. Libertarian, liberal Harvard professor, same issue. What is it? The principal problem that's creating a hole in America, the principal problem that we're struggling with as a society is the breakdown of the American family. Now, you don't have to follow politics too long in Pennsylvania to think, hey, wasn't Rick Santorum talking about that for a long time? Yeah, I was, because it's true. In fact, in the book that Putnam does, he says, you know, if you come from a 2-parent family and you're raised in a neighborhood of 2-parent families and you go to school in that 2-parent family's neighborhood school, the chances of you being successful in America are the same no matter what the color of your skin or your race or your ethnicity. The same. There is no gap. It all is about family structure. And by the way, if you come from a single-parent family in a neighborhood of single-parent families and go to the schools in that single-parent family school, the chances of you succeeding in America are almost zero to reach the top 20%. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what party you are. That's not good enough for America. We can do better in America. And if we aren't the party that says that we can do better and have a plan to do that, then we need to get a new party. We have an opportunity in this election to transform the electorate. Yes, put proposals forward to help strengthen the family, to help strengthen those who are working in the middle, those who are struggling. Everything from immigration policy, which is destroying opportunities for lower and middle income workers by flooding this nation with both illegal and legal immigrants who are almost all unskilled. We need someone who's willing to stand up and fight for working Americans so they have a better opportunity. We also need someone who understands that there's another threat to our shores. It's not just by the economy of our country, but it's also from abroad. You may recall back in 2006, I traveled around the state of Pennsylvania giving a speech, a series of speeches called The Gathering Storm of the 21st Century. I was criticized by the Harrisburg Patriot and a whole bunch of others calling me a warmonger, and all he wants to do is put our kids in battle. I had nothing of the kind. I wanted to alert America to what I saw as the coming problem. I had spent most of the spring and early summer battling the previous administration, trying to pass a bill in the United States Senate. I was opposed by the President of the United States. And you know what the bill was? You know what my speech was about? The speech was about radical Islam, and in particular, Iran and a nuclear weapon. That's what I talked about. I actually proposed a bill to put sanctions for the first time on Iran because of their nuclear development program. I was opposed by President Bush because he wanted to talk to the Iranians. We forget that, but that's true. He opposed me, so did Condi Rice. And you know who battled me on the floor of the Senate? We lost by 3 votes. I got several Democrats to vote with me. But I pushed that bill, even though the administration didn't want me to. We lost by 3 votes. Just so you know who voted against me, Joe Biden, John Kerry, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. All 4 voted no. So you want someone who has a track record, who understands after 9/11, as I did, when the president got up and said we were at war against terror, I realized my president was lying to me. We weren't in a war against terror. We were in a war against jihadism. We were in a war that required me, as a United States Senator from this state, to understand the nature of our enemy and to do my best to teach my colleagues and to talk to the people of my state and my country about the threats that faced us, irrespective of the consequence of that action. And so I did. I went out and learned everything I could, and I realized who the enemy was. It had nothing to do with the state of Israel. It had nothing to do with American actions in the region. That they hated us because of who we are, not because of what we do. And then we needed someone to go out and tell the truth about the nature of the enemy. I gave a speech at the National Press Club in 2006, challenged the president to identify the enemy. Does this all sound familiar? I asked him to identify the enemy. We were going to lose this battle not just in Iraq, but in the entire Middle East until we understood the problem. I don't know if you saw the other day that I was listed in a magazine online. My picture and a quote describing ISIS. You know what magazine it was? ISIS. I was listed as an enemy. I would not hasten to say that Barack Obama was not listed as an enemy in that same publication. Why is it that Iran shouldn't get a nuclear weapon? Why is it that that's the seminal issue of our time? How many people in this audience know the difference between a Sunni and a Shiite? Why would you? We're not in a war against Islam or anything approaching that. So why would you know? None of our leaders have been honest with you. Why is it that Democrats and Republicans alike all agree that Iran should not get a nuclear weapon? I mean, they don't agree on anything. They don't agree what time of day it is. Yet they all agree Iran shouldn't get a nuclear weapon. Why is there such consensus on that? Did you ever stop and wonder why they all believe that? Well, Iran's a great sponsor of terrorism. Yeah, there are lots of countries that are sponsors of terrorism. But the reason is they know something that they don't share. They don't talk about because it's politically incorrect to do so. But the reality is that Iran is a very dangerous country because it is a theocracy. It is a theocracy with a very specific theocratic ideal. Anybody know what happened, about 8-10 years ago? They built a major construction project in Iran. It wasn't reported in the press at all, but I was done during the time I was in the Senate. I found out about it. It's a huge boulevard, beautiful, state-of-the-art road, beautiful boulevard, built between the town of Qom and the city square in Tehran. Anybody know why that boulevard was built? It was built to a little place called the Jamkaran Well. The Jamkaran Well happens to be where the 12th Imam resides. Who is the 12th Imam? Well, he is a direct successor of Muhammad the Prophet. And he is to return when? He is to return at a time of great conflagration and strife and global conflict. And the world is raging at war to lead radical Shiite Islam to a global caliphate. The 12th Imam lived in the 10th or 9th or 10th century, but is waiting for that moment. Ladies and gentlemen, they built a major road. Over half the people of Iran believe the end of the world is in the next 5 years. And this is a country that our president is about to put on a path to nuclear weapons. That's why nobody wants Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And nobody in this country, if they knew the truth about what Iran is, what they believe in, why they believe it, would understand that containing Iran is not like containing China or the Soviet Union or Russia. They don't want to die. Kim Jong-un doesn't want to die. North Koreans don't want to die. The object of the Iranian regime is to die and bring about the end of times. That is a fundamentally different strategy, that mutual assured destruction and containment will not work. Why does every Israeli party, left to right, understand the quintessential threat that Iran? Because they know the truth. And we have political figures in our country who are afraid to tell you the truth. You want real leadership in America? It starts with one word: honesty. We cannot do a deal with a country that will not keep a deal. The Iranians have never kept a single treaty. The interim agreement that they are engaged in right now as we negotiate, they have violated. There are 12 provisions with respect to the weapons development portion of the Iranian nuclear program. 12 specific provisions in the interim agreement. They have not kept 11. And we continue to believe that when we get a final deal, they'll keep them all. This is not leadership. What's happening in America today, this is the most dangerous thing a leader of a country has done since Neville Chamberlain walked off a plane and held up peace in our time. And when it comes to the 2016 election, wouldn't it be great to have someone going up against a former Secretary of State who actually knows their stuff, who actually isn't going to be intimidated? I don't know about you, but Greg's a real estate guy. I could come and say, I read an article in the Harrisburg Patriot about the real estate market here, and go talk to Greg and say, hey, Greg, I understand real estate's bad here and here. And he'd look at me and say, you know what you're talking about. I said, well, I just got a briefing on it. And he would push back and say, no, you're wrong, and this and this and this is the case. Now, what you going to do? Everybody else who's looking at running for president right now, his experience would be out of a briefing book against someone who lived it. We need someone who can stand up and say, you were on the wrong side when I was here. You were on the wrong side when I was here. You don't understand this problem. And take it to them. Final point. Another area of freedom is under assault in America for the first time in the history of our country. Let me repeat that. Another area of freedom is an assault being assaulted in America by our government for the first time in the history of our country. And that is our first freedom, the freedom of conscience, the freedom to believe what you want to believe and practice that in your life. It was the foundational reason for our country. We came here because we were people who were oppressed and were not able to practice our faith, not just within the four walls of our church, but that's not what freedom of religion is. It's a freedom for a full-throated exercise of your beliefs. And for the first time in the history of our country, we have a government that is telling us you will believe what you are told to believe. And if you don't, you will be prosecuted. You're going to be prosecuted. Ladies and gentlemen, our country is a great country because faith has been an active component in creating a good, decent, and virtuous people. As John Adams said, our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. Religion is on decline in America. Why? Because it is less freely voiced. Do you realize in the Hobby Lobby case, the Solicitor General of the United States said the following, quote, "Once you enter into business for profit in America, you lose your First Amendment freedom of religion." That's Barack Obama's lawyer. You want to know what's coming? Listen to what's here. Listen to what is now. There are people in America who are losing their businesses, being fined, being told that they need to be rehabilitated. We have chaplains who are being thrown out of the military. Not one, not two, many. It is happening now. It is happening in America right now as we sit. And the impact on America is profound. Not just because we won't be able to articulate our religious beliefs or live them out in our workplace, because freedom itself will be assaulted. What good is freedom of the press if you can't print what you believe? What good is freedom of speech if you can't speak what's on your mind? Some have said this is a issue of the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. I read something the other day that has convinced me it's probably not. This really is about the Establishment Clause. You say, wait a minute. The Establishment Clause is there to make sure there isn't a church, a state church. It's also there to make sure there isn't a state religion that's secular too. And what we're now seeing is the church of the left imposing their values and saying you cannot disagree. We will not tolerate disagreement. If you dare disagree, we're going to call you all sorts of names. We're going to punish you. We're going to fine you. Here we are back again. The state rising up, not based on the Bible, but based on some secular set of values and trying to impose that. They're not looking for tolerance. They're looking for conformity. And so I go back to G.K. Chesterton. How did this happen? How did it happen? Let's just be honest with ourselves. It happened because we let it happen. Because we were so busy doing our own things that we just, well, you know, America's still the greatest and freest country. Pat's right. This is still a great country. It's still probably the most free country. But it's different. Ronald Reagan said freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. People ask me all the time, Senator, why are you doing this? Why are you out here thinking about running for president again, spending all this time away? You did 385 town hall meetings the last time in Iowa. You know, the average attendance at those town hall meetings was 12 people. 12 people. During that race, everybody went to the top of the polls before the Iowa caucuses except one candidate. It was a month before the election. I remember reporters, I'm going around doing my town hall meetings, going to my speeches, and reporters who started to follow me would say, why are you still doing this? Don't you realize nobody likes you? Everybody else is doing well, but you're not. I just said, you know what? I was called to do this because I think my country needs to hear what I have to say. And I'm going to go out and give it my best and just let the chips fall where they may. The Sunday before the caucus, I was at a church in Sioux City, Iowa. Got a chance to speak at this evangelical church, and after the church service, the pastor came up to me, and he handed me a little box. He said, when I got from my desk today and I walked past these on the bookshelf, I thought of you. So I decided I was going to give these to you. And so he handed me this little, looked like a box of cufflinks, and I opened them up. I thought they were cufflinks, but they were I couldn't tell. They looked like greenish, had markings on them. Didn't know whether they were stone or metal. So I looked at them. What do you say? Thank you. And so he said, do you know what they are? Busted. I said, no. As a matter of fact, I don't. What are they? He said, I got these from Jerusalem. He said, you know the story of Jesus at the well and the widow coming up and giving everything she had. It wasn't much. She was very poor. But she gave everything she had. The story of the widow's mite. These are mites that are 2,000 years old from Jerusalem. And I want to give them to you because you were willing to give all. And he said, I predict that God will bless that. Ladies and gentlemen, does America deserve your best? Do your children and grandchildren deserve your all? Do you think America is going to continue to be the blessed country of God as we continue to walk away from his truth and his people don't fight? His people talk about compromising those values and abandoning those values and just taking what they have, which is still a lot. Oh yes, we are the most blessed country in the world. And many believe that we will be so even if we don't deserve it. People ask me all the time, why are you here? And my answer is very simple. I'll be damned if we're going to lose this country on my watch. In my book, Blue Collar Conservative, I talk about how in every speech I give, people always come up to me after and say, Senator, what should I do? And I give the same answer no matter who it is, whether they're really wealthy or very poor. I give the same answer. And the answer is, do something. Do something. Oh, I know you're here and you're doing something. I know you may go home and you may get involved in your politics, and that's great. That's wonderful. But what are you doing in your families? Do your children have the values you do? Do they understand who America is, what we are, what we believe in, and are willing to fight for those values? What's going on in your neighborhood schools? What's going on in your church? I saw a survey the other day that 90% of pastors believe biblical truth on a variety of moral and cultural issues in this country, but only 10% ever preach about them. What's going on in your church? And what are you doing about it? How much do you self-censor in your family, in your business? Will you just choose not to bring up issues, not to debate the issues of the day because, well, your position is unpopular? You know what I learned, ladies and gentlemen? It's darn near impossible to win an argument you don't make. So I would say do something. If you want to help me, you can get your phones out right now and text freedom to 44144. That's how you could join Patriot Voices. We're fighting. We're fighting on a variety of fronts, and we'll continue to do so. Because America's worth it. And so I would say to each and every one of you, America is in your hands. It's not in the hands of those who are putting on the uniform exclusively anymore. No, no. The problems we're confronting, yes, are grave overseas, but they are just as big here at home. But here's the great thing. We are still the greatest country in the history of the world. We still have a people who believe overwhelmingly in the values of our country, but they've been convinced that they're on the losing side of history. Please, for the sake of your country, go out, earn those widow's mites, and earn God's blessing on this great land. Thank you, and God bless you.